Morning, everyone. Icy here. Sorry for the background. It's a little dark in the morning. All right. I was just reading some stuff in regards to what's going on with these unfair, unjust, illegal law actions that are being committed by prosecutors and by so-called elected officials in office. And the fact is that currently the United States is on a path to becoming a communist nation. And all these protests that these students are having throughout the nation, walkouts on school and everything else, if this does in fact become a communist nation, their actions right there will result in their being shot. They fail to understand that. So it behooves the adults right now to prevent that from ever happening so that these kids can actually grow up in a free society. Problem is that no one wants to stand up against those that are currently in power. Good example is in the military. We're taught that you do not obey an unlawful order, which means if the order given by your superior, your officer, your senior enlisted, is unlawful, it is a violation of what is written down, you do not have to obey it. Matter of fact, you're supposed to, by general meaning, you're supposed to stand up to them and tell them, no, it's unlawful. You can't do that. That's what has to happen in our society today. You have police officers, both city, state, county, federal, that are refusing to stand up against unlawful orders or law orders that are actually counter to what status used to be. A good example is that one father that the FBI went with, I don't know, the report says between 20 and 30 armed officers that were carrying, not assault rifles. I don't know why I said that. That's stupid of me. They were carrying rifles and body armor to go and arrest the guy because he was a pro-life protester. And he even volunteered to turn himself in, but they had to storm his house, put on a show of force to intimidate him. Those officers should have known better. They never should have agreed to do that. The problem is that they're not paying attention to what their actual oath of office is and what the rules and regulations are for their office. You don't do something as stupid as that. They know better, but they did it. So that tells me that if this country does start swinging towards communism, which it is swinging towards now, those very officers that refuse to stand up to their authority figures are going to be the ones that are going to kick in your door and shoot you on sight, or just arrest you and your entire family, and your whole family be destroyed. People fail to pay attention to history and what happens to societies that swing towards communism. During the Bolshevik Revolution, 1916, 1917 time frame in Russia, the communist, or the People's Party is what they used to call themselves, wound up taking control of the country. But to make an example of those that stood up against them, they arrested the royal family, the Tsar, and his wife and his children. They executed them after they kept them isolated for a while, telling the people that they were, they had gone away and they just quietly left office. But they didn't. They killed them. Okay? Under Mao Zedong in China, he said, I know better than you farmers on how to grow crops. And because of his actions, the Great Famine occurred and 30 million people died. Each of these countries including Cuba, Venezuela, Vietnam, Cambodia, that had all swung towards communism, the first thing they did was they disarmed the citizens so that no one could fight back. The second thing they did was they chose their political opponents that thought differently than they did, and they killed them. Not just them, but their children, their families, their relatives. They would take people that were just the mayor of a city or city leaders, and they would gather them up, execute them as an example of, you don't go against us or this is what's going to happen. You have these people that are currently in law enforcement in this country that have gotten a taste of power. And there's an old saying, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, they're corrupted now. You got these, a few law enforcement officers that are really bad apples, but they're making the whole bunch look bad. When you start beating people and stuff. And then you got the educators that are in our colleges and high schools that are stressing communism and socialism as the way to go because you have to be sociable towards others. That's how they present it. All it is you have to be sociable. You have to be respectful to each other and not, hurt each other, but you have to do what, the government tells you to do. Well, they control the government. So, what can we do? Well, this is what I suggest. Take it or leave it. Grain of salt. Like I said, I'm too old to care. I'm going to die here in a few years, so what happens to me doesn't matter. What happens to you young people really does matter. If it's against the law, you stand up for it. But you also has to be, how to put this? If you have a teacher that tells you that this is the way it is, question them. Don't accept their word. Question them. Make them prove, not through just statements, well, I'm saying so, or, well, I wrote a book on it. Prove that what they say is correct. Question everything. Don't accept things for what you're being told. Okay? Because the simple fact is that if you're being taught wrong and you accept it, then you're going to believe that what's wrong is correct. You have to question everything. The purpose of an educator is to educate and make you question everything so that you increase your ability to understand, but also to question what you do not understand. So that's the first thing you have to do. You've got to fix the education system. The second thing you have to do is you have to make sure that we impose term limits upon these politicians. And you also have to put into there that if they violate their oath of office, they are instantly, automatically, without question, removed from office. A good example is Mayorkas. Mayorkas is in charge of, the Department of Homeland Security. He says, if you have more than 100,000 people coming into your country illegally, he's not doing his job. He should automatically be removed from office. But he's already let over 1 million people into this country illegally. And if they're here illegally and you don't know they're here, that means you don't know if they're carrying drugs, you don't know if they're carrying weapons, you don't know carrying biological weapons, Plus, your children's lives are at risk. Your fellow students' lives are at risk. Your very core values of this nation are at risk because of the failure to enforce the law. So it's common sense. You support and defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, that means you have to fight against the current politicians that are in violation of the oath of office. No one does that. You've got people that are so embedded in politics, in office, that it would take a nuclear bomb just to get rid of them. That's how crazy. I mean, and that's both parties. I'm not saying just strictly Democrat. I'm saying both parties. I mean, Mitch McConnell's married to a lovely Chinese lady, but she has ties to the Chinese Communist Party through her family members. So let's not go there, all right? It's both parties. Both parties are corrupt. Both parties have issues. Both parties, it's a question of power. Once you're in power, you don't want to relinquish it. These people don't want to give up what they have. They get the lifestyle, the pampered, personal protection. They get the when they decide to retire, they get paid their paycheck for life. It's not right. So let's start questioning everything these politicians say and get rid of these unlawful orders that they keep issuing to us. Make them prove before you do it that it's wrong. Oh, and on a final note, all those college students that supported Antifa and the riots and destroyed all the government buildings, if you really want to see change come about in this country, every single one of them should be arrested and tried, even if it's just for damage to government property. If you break the law, you should pay the price. I have nothing against peaceful protests where nothing is destroyed. You march, you have your say, it's peaceful. Dr. Martin Luther King, prime example of a man. God, I love that man. He set the example. And those that are corrupt, corrupted the example. So now you have, for example, Kamala Harris establishing a fund to post bail for the people that are destroying government buildings and throwing rocks and bottles at police officers. That right there tells you who you got running the country and what needs to be fixed. All right, Icy out.